Remember this saying, a few seeds make a small harvest, but a lot of seeds make a big harvest. Each of you must make up your own mind about how much to give, but don't feel sorry that you must give, and don't feel that you are forced to give. God loves people who love to give. God can bless you with everything you need, and you will always have more than enough to do all kinds of good things for others. So, we were playing cards at the house the other day, and my daughter was talking about something with regards to New York City, and she said, well, you know, there are 5 boroughs in New York City. She goes, but I don't really know what they are. And so I went, well, you know, they're Queens and the Bronx, and, you know, and I named off a few of them. And my son went, how do you know all of this stuff? He says, it doesn't matter what anybody asks you, you have an answer. Which I never really confessed to him that half of the time I'm just making it up as I go along. But it impressed him. And the reason I have all of this information tumbling through my brain is because I read tons of useless facts that when I'm reading them, I have no idea whether it will ever come to any level of fruition or not, whether it will have any meaning at all. But then there's some point in my life where that question comes up, and I go, I know that, and I'm able to share that answer with them. And so my kids think I'm a genius, which, considering the fact that they're all adults now, is really quite amazing. And it's actually very impressive. It just shows that I probably am a genius. The reason I'm telling you all of this stuff is because I have a lot of difficulty with Thanksgiving. The reason I have difficulty with Thanksgiving is because we spend so much time talking about God the Creator. And we give thanks for the things that God has given us. And we give thanks for the weather, and we give thanks for the sunshine, and we give thanks for the flowers that grow, and we give thanks for the corn that ripens in the fields, if it ever ripens. And we do all of that stuff, attesting it to God's bounty towards us. The problem I have is, because I do lots of reading and lots of thoughtful things in terms of trying to grow in wisdom and understanding, is that I find as time goes on, that whole idea becomes more and more improbable for me. It becomes sentimental. And so we talk about God around Thanksgiving as if God is somehow, looking down on us and saying, oh, we'll create corn there, we'll create wheat over here, let's do soybeans over there. As if those things would never happen if God was not actively involved in them. And it's sentimental, and it strikes me as superstitious. And I understand why people in the Old Testament would think that way. For them, I can imagine, without the scientific background, without the understanding of weather patterns and all of that stuff, it must have appeared quite amazing that you could put corn into the ground and it would grow. You could put wheat into the ground and it would grow. And so whenever you were living life on the edge, whenever it was a matter of survival, whether you would starve or thrive based on how well the crops did, I can imagine that you would spend a lot of time offering prayers to a deity, seeking blessing. seeking God's intervention to ensure that everything goes well for you. Because the reality is, unlike today, if the crops failed, there was nothing. It wasn't a case that they could send across the ocean and ask for more food to be sent from the place where the crops did well. It wasn't a case that other countries would therefore, have lots of bounty that they wanted to share. If you failed in your crops, if the crops withered in the ground and died because there wasn't enough rain, you went hungry. People died of starvation. And we see that still today in some of the world's more tenuous areas. Africa, the reality of Africa is that people there are always hungry, because the ability of the African nations to feed themselves in the midst of wars and civil wars and droughts, which in some of the countries has been going on for years now. The ability of them to feed themselves is severely handicapped. And so they are always looking for food. They're always hungering for that next meal. And that's one of the reasons why there's so many appeals that go out, so many, Save the Children foundations and things like that want us who have a lot to be able to provide for those who don't. But to put that down to God strikes me as odd. It strikes me as superstitious. Because the reality is, if indeed God is blessing us with sun and rain and soil and harvest and all of that stuff, then we are indeed a blessed people. And the people in Africa are indeed a cursed people. And that doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me that we should receive such bounty on an ongoing basis, and the people in Africa should have to struggle day by day in order to survive. And that's why I have trouble with Thanksgiving. Because we will sing hymns that talk about God as creator, all of the things that God provides us. Like we plow the field and scatter the good seed on the land, but it is fed and watered by God's almighty hand. And I go and I say, well, no, it's because of the low pressure system that's actually coming in from the west, and the fact that it creates rain over, and things like that. And we have such bountiful harvest because we have pesticides and herbicides that we put on the land. And so that creates more crops. So the fact that we would associate this with God creates difficulty for me. Then, of course, the question becomes, if God is not the one doing all of this stuff, then why do we have Thanksgiving? What is it that we come to be thankful for? Well, again, it goes back to the fact that, in the early days when Thanksgiving was first created as a national memorial, national remembrance, it came out, we always talk about the Pilgrims, and that. And the Pilgrims, even though they were technically American, the Pilgrims needed the intervention of the native peoples in order to survive those first couple of years. They needed the intervention of their neighbors who knew how to grow plots, who knew how to grow crops within a harsh environment, within a different environment than what the Pilgrims had dealt with back in England or the Netherlands. And so it was the natives who the the pilgrims should be giving thanks for. For the fact that they brought their wisdom and they brought their insight. And maybe that's what Thanksgiving is really about. It's about acknowledging the fact that we cannot do it on our own. That we cannot be self-sufficient because we choose to be. No one in this world is self-sufficient. Bill Gates, for all of his billions of dollars, still needs people. Obama and Harper, for all of the power that they have as national leaders, still need people in order to survive. We need people to help us, to work alongside us, to contribute so that we can survive. I am able to eat whenever I am hungry. I am able to enjoy a bounty of food because anytime I want to, I can walk into a grocery store and pick up all that I need. I'm able to do that because people like Paul work the land, and in fact, work way harder than I do to create food, to ship for producers, who produce the food, who ship it to the stores, who sell it to me. And the reason I can do that, the reason I can walk into a store and buy those things, is because my wife makes way more money than I do. No, actually, the reason I can do that is because you, as a people, as a Christian community, choose to give to the work of the church. And part of what you give pays my salary. And so enables me to go out and do the things that I need to do in order to survive. So I'm not in any way suggesting that God is not an important player in all of this process. For indeed, I think what we're hearing is that God creates a spirit of community, invites a spirit of connection, challenges us to look towards our neighbor and towards our, geez, that's the second time. Towards our neighbors and our enemies even, and to provide for them the things that they need in order to survive. So God's role in this is to instill in us a sense of community, a desire to see ourselves not as independent of everyone else, not as self-sufficient from everyone else, but as connected to everyone. And so when we come together and celebrate in a spirit of thanksgiving, we do so to give thanks for the fact that we are part of community, that we are part of a wider world that is not entirely dependent upon our own abilities, our own resources to meet our needs. I think one of the examples, like when we had Linda read the letter from Raven this morning, that was an excellent example of how the community creates a spirit of support and encouragement and thanksgiving. That here in a midst of what really can only be described as a tragic circumstance, you have Raven being supported and encouraged by the simplest of acts. People take a bell on a piece of paper and they stick it in a window. I mean, it doesn't get much simpler than that. But the reason it's important, the reason it has meaning, is because in doing that, we reveal the fact that we are connected as a community. That what happens to one of us affects all of us. And so we participate in supporting and encouraging each other. And in that, we give thanks for the fact that we are able to do that. So today, when we celebrate, when we share in Thanksgiving, if you want to offer prayers of thanks to God for the crops that have been harvested, for the food that is on our table, by all means. And I'm not in any way saying you can't do that anymore. But I'm saying look at the broader image of that Thanksgiving in the fact of the people who contribute to make all of that possible. The people who contribute to make community possible. We're going to come around the table in a short while. And this table represents that community. When it first took place, when Jesus was with his disciples and sat around a table, there were 13 of them who gathered. It was Jesus' community. It was the people in his life that he needed in order to feel encouraged in the ministry that he was undertaking, in order to have the strength to fulfill his role and his purpose as God's anointed one. We like to think, or might like to believe, that Jesus could have done it all on his own. He didn't need anyone. But the reality is, if he didn't have anybody with him, then when he died, everything would have died with him. But instead, he was surrounded at table by those who were important to him, because those were the ones that he needed, and the ones who needed him in turn. And so when we come to the table, we are giving thanks for that community of ancient times that is still our community in contemporary times. We give thanks for the fact that the person that you are sitting beside, or the person across the aisle from you, is part of your essential community. Part of someone who is a place of support and strength, a place of compassion, a place of grace, a place of love and forgiveness and understanding. You find that here. You find that here. And as I've said to you many times before, that is the one thing above all else that impresses me so much about you as a people of God. Your ability to be supportive and caring to each other. That is a cause for thanksgiving. Maybe it is God who motivates that within us. Maybe it is God who sends the sun and sends the rain. Although, if that is true, he hasn't done a very good job this year. But we're not going to talk about it. But the reality is that Thanksgiving has been and always is lived out in the strength and the encouragement and compassion and peace of community, of being God's people together. So when you celebrate your Thanksgiving, be it today or tomorrow, or maybe it was yesterday. Give prayers of thanks. Thank God for food. Thank God for the things that we have. Thank God for the fact we don't live in Africa. But remember also to thank God for the community, whether it be family or friends or Christian community that surrounds you. Because it is there where life is recognized, where life is lived. It is there where God's purpose is most profoundly experienced. And that is a good reason for Thanksgiving.